What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Become a Local Leader. My name is Grant Findlay-Shirras, and on today's show, we have a very influential person in real estate. And she's not a top producing agent or a top team or a big broker owner, but she's arguably more important than all of them. She is the CEO of the Council of MLS, the premier organization leading the entire multiple listing service, otherwise known as the MLS, all across North America. She's responsible for implementing the organization's strategic plan. So I'm really excited for you to meet her, to get to know her, to learn from her, because there's so much change happening in the real estate industry, especially on the association MLS. And we'll talk about the NAR and the new policy that came through recently. There's lots of change that agents and brokers need to know about, that startups in the industry, investors who want to invest in the industry need to know about. So I'm really excited for you guys to get her perspective. Before the MLS, she was also an executive director of a home energy company, and her original background was in finance, working for the big banks like Bank of America and Wells Fargo. And when she's not being a leader of the MLS, you can find her on stages like at Inman Connect. She's been featured in the media and on influencer lists like Swanpool's Power 200, which kudos to you. I hope to be on there one day. So let's get excited and get started and chat with Miss Denee Evans. Thank you, Denee, for being on the show.
Thank you for the invitation. I appreciate the opportunity, and thanks for that lovely introduction.
Well, for those who don't know you and know the CMLS, what is it? And just give people an overview of why you exist.
Absolutely. So CMLS, or the Council of Multiple Listing Services, is the National Trade Association for MLSs. We focus specifically on helping to train, educate, engage, and provide resources for an MLS. We have, as of today, 226 members, and those 226 members service about 1.4 million subscribers. So there's around 600 MLSs, but I think it's 640 total. But so we serve 226, but they make up a majority of the market. So
what? So why the difference? 226 to 600? How come those other MLSs aren't a part of the CMLS?
So we're working on that. But I was looking at some of our numbers the other day where I said it's 1.4 million. Mm-hmm. The other ones, sometimes they can be a little bit smaller, so maybe it wouldn't be within their budget to join our membership. Sometimes our opportunity to engage with them, we're definitely trying to do outreach and bring more to the community. And so anyone listening who isn't a member, I'd love to talk with you.
Yeah. All right. Now let's get into this, issue, the pocket listing issue. Before we talk about the decision and the impact and of this, give people some background into this, the news about pocket listings, this new policy that the NAR, National Association of Realtors in San Francisco just recently made a decision on this. So just give people some background. Why did this thing come up? How did it come up? What was some of the buildup around this all about?
So as CMLS, one of our main things is to advocate for the value of MLS. What does it really create? And about 18 months ago, we came out with we call it Making the Market Work campaign. So really helping to bring some awareness to really what does the MLS facilitate. And we did some focus groups, and someone said, the MLS, I just expect it to be there. It's like the electricity. When I flip the switch on in my house, I expect the light to go on. So real estate professionals getting up each morning and they use that tool. And so, but I think there was a lot of not really understanding the value that it brings. And so we focused on this and tried to highlight the connections that it makes, right? It allows you to find the other agent who might have the property, and it was getting dismissed so much. So we did that. But then even the next level from there, I think what got generated is we're in such a competitive market right now, and this tight inventory is people looking for that competitive advantage. So what is differentiating them? So I think that we were seeing more and more of that coming into agents themselves are not only are consumers not able to see it and knowing where they need to go to find out what's available, but there's agents who don't have full access to what's on the market. And so if we look back to originally, what was the core of MLS? What was it built on from brokers who came together to form it? It was about cooperating. Competitors cooperating for the benefit of the consumer. And so we're starting to see this in certain markets specifically, it was starting to not be there and people losing sight of that value and what it does bring to the market. So that conversation has been coming up more and more, and it was brought to the NAR's Emerging Issues and Technology Advisory Board. It's a long name, but I have to focus to get it right. So it was brought up to them, and on that group, CMLS actually has 3 appointees. And so as part of that, as being at the table and part of the conversation, we think this is getting to be a big enough a thing that it needs to be addressed, because there's some longer term impacts that this has that we may not be looking at because the market is so hot and things are happening. But let's really look at what's the long-term consequences of this. And so that group started engaging around that and getting some perspective on it. And so then that's when the policy was proposed. It was about 45 days before the NAR meeting. So they said, here's what we think it is. And it was really boiled down to, if you're going to publicly market a house, then you need to contribute it to the community. Not just when it serves you specifically, but it's either you were part of the community and we're in this and we're cooperating, or not. And so this is kind of this point in time. And the trigger is, just to be clear, because there's been some confusion around it. If you publicly market a property, then you put it in the MLS. If it isn't, the seller wants privacy, they don't want to do it, then that's okay. Mm-hmm. And that's a path. But if you're going to publicly market it everywhere, then it is part of that cooperative, what I call the heart of our industry, is that cooperation among competitors.
Okay. So I got some other questions, but let's just get to the decision. So what happened? Tell everyone who's listening and watching what happened.
So it passed through the 800-member board of directors at NAR. It actually had to go through 3 steps. So it had to go through the MLS Policy Committee, mm-hmm. which was approved. Then it went in front of the NAR Executive Board, and it was recommended to move on. And then it did go in front of the 800-member board of directors, and it was voted as approved as like a 92 to 8% in favor of. So from 800 people that were representing in that room, which I was very excited to see.
Yeah. Okay. What do you think is some of the confusions? Talk about a little bit about the confusion of the rules. So what other confusion are you hearing or seeing that you maybe want to help clarify?
Definitely am hearing a lot. So one, I would start by saying, if anybody wants to know more about it, we did already start a resources page on CMLS.org. There is a place there where we started collecting, whether it's other MLS's policies, the FAQs, the policy itself. We've been just trying to assemble all that to help educate people. I think some of the biggest misinformation or the confusion is that it is not about getting in between the agent and their customer. It's not about dictating business models. It's not about taking away their right to privacy as a seller. It really is going back to making sure that what we've agreed upon as being the cooperative nature, and this MLS that is the marketplace where all the assets are available, so you know what's for sale and what fair market value is. It's about contributing to that community, right? So if you're saying that you're worried that your seller won't have their right to privacy, well, then that's okay, because you're not triggering, because you're not publicly marketing it everywhere if they want privacy. Mm-hmm. There are some areas where, maybe the homeowner needs to get their house ready to sell and they need to prep it, and how that's marketed or how that's utilized. I think there is a really big opportunity for MLSs to address that, and what we've really been pushing at CMLS since the conversation started, when the policy came out, is MLSs really need to understand the needs of their markets. And I'm going to say that sort of starts with the consumer, right? How does the consumer want to handle that? I had one MLS exec said, I just tried to sell my house, and then there was some rules around me being able to put it out there that experiencing my own process is like, hey, it made me think about this differently. And maybe we need to figure out how we can meet that need, because if we can meet the consumer need, then we're better equipping the brokers and agents using those MLSs to be the superstars and provide that service. So I think there's a great opportunity for MLSs to evaluate what we do today and how we provide that, serve the market. And this, I believe, is prompting some unbelievably good conversations within our industry that will keep us looking at how we innovate and improve to meet that market need.
Now, is this just for NAR members? Like, only if you're a member of NAR does this apply to?
Yes, officially, but I will tell you, there are other MLSs that are not NAR MLSs. And I didn't get the exact numbers for today, but most of them have something like this or have already implemented it. And it's fairly common that those MLSs follow the rules in some way. They have a little, they might be a slightly different, but for the most part, it's pretty consistent.
Do you think there may be an effect to the NAR membership because of this decision?
It's been very interesting to listen to these conversations. First, I don't think so, because just as much as we're hearing some opposed, I'm hearing stories also of people like there was agents who are putting thank you notes under the desk, under the computer keyboard of one of the MLS execs, of like stepping up and doing this because they were concerned that if they spoke up, that then they wouldn't be included in those, say, private listing networks. They couldn't be part of the right groups that had those that pool of inventory that wasn't on the MLS, but they couldn't speak out about it because then maybe they wouldn't be able to have access to it. So there's
it's like high school. It's like being in the cool kid group and seeing the cool kids do something wrong. You're like, damn it, I don't want this to happen. I think it's bad for the world, but I want to be cool. So.
And it's your business, right? Like you need access to that. So I think overall, if we step back and look at this, if I describe the MLS as it's the marketplace, right? It is where we're putting everything so that I know what homes are available, and not only do consumers having access to that, but the agents. If the agent, there was one story in the MLS policy where a gentleman from San Francisco got up and said, here's my morning routine. I log in and look at 7 to 10 different places so I can see what's currently on the market. And do I have access to that? Will they share it with me? Will they show it? Like, it's a little bit more towards the commercial market is what I've heard it described, versus when we agree to cooperate and have this common marketplace where all the stuff is ultimately for the consumer. I always bring my mom into the conversation, but say, if my mom has to get up in the morning and know that she needs to go look at 10 places to find out what house she can buy, what's available, and then compare what prices, and are they listing the features of the house differently, I just don't think it's in the best interest of the consumer. And we as an industry, if we're not really focused on that and understanding how we better meet that need, I think long-term, that's not good for us. Broker agent MLS.
When you think about making decisions for the long term, are there any other industries that you look to for insight and like analogies and guidance to be like, well, the finance industry did this, or the manufacturing industry did this, or e-commerce? Like, do you ever look at other industries to pull insight so you make the right decisions?
I used an example at our conference. So we just finished the CMLS does a conference each year, and we're in Salt Lake. And my opening remarks were, we've all heard the Netflix Blockbuster story, right? So Blockbuster, like, not willing to change its ways and meet consumer demands. And I said, but actually, I think we need to be looking at don't be Netflix, because yes, Netflix is the main one right now, but if you read about how many people are competing for their business and to take away their consumers and meeting consumer demands in a different way, like, they have to stay on top of their game so they don't become Blockbuster, right? So, and the driving force is, what is that consumer wanting? And I think sometimes they don't always know, but it's like, how do we innovate and sort of anticipate what it is that they're going to want and how we best meet those future needs? So, like, if you look at MLSs today, we collect data points, right? 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 2,500 square feet. I can tell you right now, we're in the middle of this change that it's like, it's the Pinterest search. an open concept with, walkable to my kids' school, and I wanted a nice neighborhood with parks. And so how do we have to keep looking forward and pushing that, which means change. And I think in general, people don't like change. I think specifically our industry doesn't particularly care for it. You make any change in an MLS, in some of the fields, and that that can cause some fun. So I think we have to sort of push past that, even though it's a little bit uncomfortable, and anticipate what those needs are. Because there's some cool technologies right now about that particular change.
So one of the questions I want to ask is, what if it was flipped? Okay, so what if NAR said, we are going to allow this? What would the future look like, in your perspective, if we allowed this stuff to continue to happen?
I truly believe that it would just create multiple marketplaces within a marketplace. It just continued to fractures. I hear all the time about how fractured the MLS industry is today. There's, say, 600 and, just around 600 of us. If then it's the marketplace from the MLS, but then the broker has a marketplace, and there's, however many brokers in that marketplace, and you need to go to, say, there's now what was maybe one MLS, and now there's 30 platforms, is kind of how I hear them talked about these days. That what is that consumer experience? And I think that opens up another vacuum of somebody else is then going to go try to collect all of that marketplace into one spot. So I think it fractures us as an industry even further, and away from truly what services the customer and the consumer. And so I think if, especially as an industry, we can really consider, okay, maybe you do have one business model that wants to do it this way, and let's talk about the long-term impacts of that. Or how can we do that is within the MLS itself, within the current marketplace? So can we facilitate, because the consumer need is changing, right? The brokers are looking for ways to be competitive, and I'm a huge believer and advocate and constantly pushing, how can MLSs better partner with their brokers? How can they better understand that? At the same time, we do need to understand that consumer need.
So I'm just thinking through this right now. I go, okay, what would more fracturization, or when would that be a good thing? And how can MLS still help in this? So right now, the MLS, all the areas, and you have NAR, and then you have Realtor.com and Zillow, and you have all these sites that just have all the listings, no matter what they are, whether a condo, a loft, a townhouse, a state, like they're just all there for the area. What if the fracturization allowed for each type of product that a customer is looking for to now be on different marketplaces and different platforms? So here's the marketplace for condos. Here's the marketplace for lakefront homes. Here's the marketplace for $1 million properties. Here's the marketplace for mobile homes. What do you think about that? Because when I think more fracturization, I wonder if there's a good fracturization.
I think that I go back to my mom. Is my mom going to know, like, I need to go to this place because I think that I want a condo, but really I want a smaller single family residence? I think it's putting too much onus on the consumer that they need to know more than they need to know in order to go find, they just want the house. They want their perfect dream house. And so us as an industry, how can we make that easier? And so I would take what you just described and flipped it. If it's still within the MLS and it can be sorted out of there very simply, which it should be able to be done. And I think there are some websites that do exactly what you're saying. They do focus on those things, and that's a service they provide. But when it's fueled by the MLS, I think it still allows for efficient flow of data, and people can innovate on this because it's then not, 30 different marketplaces with one area. How do they maybe need to talk to each other or coordinate or flow to better meet that consumer need? Mm-hmm. I don't see the benefit of it. And again, I go back to my mom, who I always joke, she doesn't know what I do. She can never describe it.
Join the club.
Like, I just want to get a house, or I just want to sell my house, or I just want to buy a house. Like, make it easy for me. I don't care about all the other stuff.
Now, there are some people who are not fans of this decision. There are brokerages. There are some MLSs, and there are some agents. Why don't you talk about those three groups and like why you think some of them are objecting, and maybe how their mindset may be just displaced? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think overall MLSs are in support of it. Obviously, that's why they exist, is to facilitate that marketplace and bring those competitors together. I think we've had some feedback from MLSs about not having quite enough detail how it will implement and how compliance will work and what are the consequences, because some of that is not some of it, that is left up to the local markets. And so that's where CMLS is working really hard to assemble. I told you that web page with the resources and the information. We're working very hard to continue to roll out as quickly as possible. It's been a whirlwind of getting back from San Francisco of like, how do we collect this information and get it out? Because there are several MLSs who've already implemented policies about this. Not even just like in the last few months, which we've seen a lot of that, but previous to that. So it's not necessarily anything new. I just think across the board, we said, you know, we believe that protecting the heart of our industry of cooperation is very important. I think that's what this said. So overall MLSs, there's just some questions about how it implements. The CMLS is working really hard. We're partnering with NAR to make sure we're coordinating, you know, what is their actual policy, and then there's best practices. So they're clarifying policy and we're working on getting those best practices out.
The MLSs who don't like it maybe just are the ones who really don't like change and are afraid of the failure and likely stresses and headaches and maybe resources and money that goes into this change. And fair enough.
Change.
Okay.
Again, change is always fun, but it is the only constant.
How about some of these brokerages that don't like it?
So one of the things I try to say is this policy wasn't about not supporting or any particular business model. I think like I said, there's local market needs. So how are the brokerages, and it's very different. So I live in Las Vegas, and the way brokerages work and operate and call things here can be very different than what they're doing in Boston. There's a lot of similarities, but there's differences because of the local market needs and the customs. So I don't think it's about any particular business model, but it is that we have to look at those consumer needs. And so I think they've been working really hard to say, hey, we think we have this, but maybe it's not in line with that heart of the cooperation, right? That's really what we've been built on to this point. So I think their pushback, some of it I've heard has been misunderstandings. So why they said they probably didn't support it wasn't necessarily true. And so I've tried to help clarify some of those things. Will it cause some change for some brokers? Probably, because they had some things going there. But overall, I think if we look at the long term, what this does for our industry and the benefit to the consumer, and that was a big part of the conversation that came up the last few weeks before we got to San Francisco, is just equal housing opportunity, right? The ability for the consumer, no matter if you know the right agent or that your agent knows the right person, that I have the opportunity to buy the houses that are on the market. Not I need to know the right place. So I think we have to go back to that and say that is the most important thing, because I don't know if you've read, but there was the danger report done 3 or 4 years, maybe 5 years ago, that said one of the biggest threats to our industry was this legislative tsunami. And so I think if we are not considering that and balancing a consumer's right to housing and equal opportunity to it with the business needs of our brokers and agents, it's difficult, but I think we have to consider both of those.
Yeah, I mean,
so that we don't have the heavy hand.
Facebook just had to change their rules, because you can't just now target ads to certain ethnicities and certain groups, because it's unfair. So that's not dissimilar. Now, some agents are unhappy about this, and some people talking about how some consumers, and you talked a little bit about consumers being like, hey, I want privacy because I'm a celebrity or super wealthy or whatever their reasoning. I feel like this is going to hurt me. Is there any other reason why I think consumers might have a backlash, and then why do you think agents are unhappy about this?
I don't think, as a consumer, I've tried to answer this a lot of different ways. I can't come up with a reason that a seller, a consumer, wouldn't want to put their house on the MLS, because something is worth what somebody's willing to pay for it. But if it's not exposed to the market, how do we know what the fair market value is? And so I was on a phone call yesterday with a gentleman from government agency, and we were talking about a different project, but I just sharing that I was happy about this policy and what it meant. And as I'm describing it, he's asking me more and more questions. And he happens to be in the DC area, and he just sold a house not too long ago. And he told me how it was presented to him of, hey, I have this network, I'll just quickly get it sold and you don't have to deal with any of this stuff. And when I'm explaining to it, he's realizing that, whoa, wait, my house wasn't exposed. I wonder if I could have gotten more money. But and not that agent didn't explain that to him. I'm not saying that they did or didn't, but it just didn't resonate. It was just the convenience. So I think that meeting that convenience for him of getting it sold quickly, but also making sure the balance, it wasn't in his mind that he now was thinking, well, maybe did I miss out? So again, it's that balance between the consumer needs, the business models, but overall exposing your home, to the market and the most number of buyers, both buyer and seller side. I can't find the good reason. And I'm a finance background, as you mentioned,
Well,
and I'm all
so
about bid ask
yeah.
and marketplaces.
So the one thing I do think about, I go, for good and for worse, FOMO is a thing that makes people spend more money.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if that's part of the marketing tactics, the play to the psychology of, hey, if this is exclusive and private and a pocket listing, then I can create this FOMO, which actually makes it sell for more than if I put it everywhere.
Sure.
What are your thoughts on consumers and agents who think that?
I think there is value to building up anticipation for it and saying there is that exclusivity. I remember even as a kid, like my dad talking about, oh, if I got it from the neighbor, I remember him talking about as he's getting a better deal, right? Like he could get it before going on there. So that's where, if that is something that is needed in the market, then I think that we have to work as MLSs. We have to figure out how we meet that local market need. And like I said, that will be different everywhere.
Well, as I'm thinking about it now, I'm going, I'm the agent, I could be pitching it to the consumer. I could be telling the seller, like, listen, I got this exclusive network. I'm going to pitch it to them, and I'm going to tell them that if they don't buy this now, I'm putting a good offer now, I'm going to put it out in the public, and then you might have to pay more. Now, does it actually end up getting that person to pay more than going on the market and seeing all the bids? I think there's actually more likelihood that the seller gets less and the agent is doing that FOMO for speed. Which then isn't good for the seller, and also for us to understand true market value. That's how I'm thinking about that.
I think what you described is some of the reason we're seeing a pickup in the iBuyer program, right? They're trying to solve that market need of making it convenient, making it quick. Some of them are even willing to sell for maybe what they wouldn't get for market value, and that's where I go back to. It's an opportunity for MLSs to really engage and understand, how do we continue to meet the need of the consumer? What are those needs? Because you know what? I think some of the feedback we're seeing is they might be willing to sacrifice dollars for speed and convenience. That's a little bit of a new thing, right? So, then the concern is iBuyers, are we getting that data in MLSs? We've got to start thinking about that, because then that impacts, how do we know what the comps are happening and what's going on in a market. So we are constantly changing, right? Like we have to be constantly changing and evaluating what that future needs of, and your exact description, right? Like they want to just be quick and get done, and balanced with how that agent operates. Right? So you need to earn your clients, and you need to earn your customers, and you need to get a contract signed, right? You shouldn't work for free. So I'm making sure that you can get your contract, protect your business, and then also support your customer, your consumer, that they need to get the house ready. And that's real life, right? That's real life. So, and there's lots of MLSs that are meeting that need today. I think that's the big thing. There was a lot of this out there anyways. And this just kind of put that line in the sand of either we're willing to cooperate together and secure that as an industry. We value that cooperation, and that's really what I think this policy was about. That was overwhelmingly approved, that we value cooperation as the heart of the industry.
Tell me about some of the things that you are doing now, because I bet you the workload is starting after this. And so what are some of the projects you're working on for this, and maybe just for other things for CMLS and the whole MLS as a whole?
Before this actually was even announced, we were looking at, I told you we did the making the market work. So what is the value of MLS? And that was really targeted to brokers and agents, just so they were understanding what that was doing for them, how that was supporting them every day for doing business. But then the next level is, and a lot of the conversation bubbled up even more, and we were already on track for doing it, was the value of the MLS to the consumer, which is really difficult to get our arms around, and I think is a huge task, and I'm confident we can do it. But I think that also strengthens the position of the broker and the agent, because if the consumer understands the value of putting it into the MLS and exposing it to the market and what goes there. So we're engaging in that. And I think it'll be the same thing where I said they just turn on the light in the morning, they expect the electricity to go on. The consumer's like, I don't really necessarily care, but I think it's important that they know that it's there and what it provides them with equal opportunity to the housing. So with that going on, like I said, we've engaged in putting together all the resources so that MLSs can implement this. Whether, like I had one MLS, we did a webinar before getting to San Francisco, one MLS who did this most beautiful graph of like, okay, we researched and surveyed our market, and there's really 4 statuses that will allow them to do a lot of the things that you're describing. Here's 4 statuses, here's how you use them, here's when the different statuses kick in. And so they implement and rolled that out about 6 months ago. And that's been working great. And so we do that was 6 months ago that they started it, and it's going extremely well. So it's, again, not new, but we just want to package all that stuff up and help MLSs understand what are their options for implementing based on what their brokers and agents want.
Now I've talked with now you and Sam now, who's at RESO. Two organizations, yeah, totally, and 2 organizations that I feel are underappreciated, I guess, in the industry. What are some of the things that you feel that CMLS does that agents sometimes forget, and they sometimes, are not appreciative of, that maybe you want to remind them of?
All right. I would say, one of the big things, part of our mission at CMLS, is how do we advance MLSs? And we advance them by making their members more successful. So how do we keep making sure that they're educated and informed? At our conference, I'm bringing in people who are developing the future technology, right? So what are some of the leading edge things? If I told you that photo, searching by look and feel, not numbers and drop downs. Mm-hmm. So we're constantly trying to bring in that type of conversation so MLSs can see what the future is, so they can continue to evolve and provide the tools needed for the brokers and agents to be the superstars, right? To service their customers. I think that's one big thing. We're just constantly pushing them to be better, to understand what's coming. And I think one of the biggest things at CMLS we've been doing is saying, which I guess is kind of cheesy or not cheesy, but not just cooperation is the heart of our industry, of the competitors cooperating, but it's that really, if we can look at it, that all the industry stakeholders. So our membership isn't just MLSs, we have business partners, because we understand there's the MLS, but it does take all these other parts and pieces to really provide an efficient marketplace where it's easy to, as an agent, if you want to implement a new tool that you think is good and that will help you do your business better, MLSs look for ways to say yes, right? How can we make this happen? How can we support you? But it has to stay also within our rules and guidelines to create that consistency and to create that gold star standard data that is, everyone wants MLS data, and they want that data because it is the goal. It's the most accurate, it's the most timely data. So we do have to keep some rules and guidelines around it so that it stays there, and that balance between that and making sure we're able to support the brokers and agents with what they want to do and move our industry forward. So I guess I'd say it's that cooperation just among industry participants to push us all a little bit more for the consumer.
So if people want to ask you some more questions about this, how can they get in touch with you?
I would say probably easiest is if you just go to cmls.org under staff. Then you can click right on there. It goes right to my email. You can call us. my phone doesn't tend to ring. I think the staff made that on purpose, but they definitely pass along the messages and I call back for sure. So emails, I would absolutely love if anybody's at an event and they see me. I love to meet in person. I'm a very much face-to-face, one-on-one type of person. Love those conversations. When I have a good conversation, I'll buy you a drink and continue to talk some more about it. Those are probably my favorites. So whatever works. I really enjoy, as you said, it's just the connections and the cooperation to make homeownership happen. That's really my personal driving force. My North Star is homeownership.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I know you're super busy. We have tried a few times, and finally we got to do an interview, and it's great that we got to do it around this topic. I know it's a hot topic, and there's a lot of change happening, but I think people just need to see what's good that can come from this, make the changes, because I think, again.
And I would ask on that, Grant, give that feedback to your MLS, but in a productive way. Like, okay, this is causing me to not do this. Like, how can we make it better? And that's my other big message. We have to have those feedback loops. We have to talk about it. How can we solve those problems? How can we make it better? So please, if you don't reach out to me, reach out to your local MLS and figure out, and talk about it.
Do it. So thanks so much. That was for today's episode. As always, if you want to get to know more leaders in the real estate industry so you can be great in real estate, subscribe to the podcast or the YouTube show, and stay tuned for the next episode. Thanks, Denee.
Thank you. Appreciate having me.